this, and we should be good to go. Okay, looks like we are good. So welcome everyone to a little earlier edition to the New Now. I am Tom Matzel. I'm out of Bellevue, Washington. That's out of Seattle, Washington. And I do one-on-one and group coaching for entrepreneurs, professional athletes, and businesses just to work on their performance, habits, and behaviors. Today, I'm actually joined with a person that I very much admire and is a family member, Ralph Domingo, or Rafael Domingo, or Rafa Domingo, and he is in Dublin, Ireland as we speak. So he's been great enough to get on a little later for him. It's 6 o'clock for you, your 8-hour difference?
Correct.
Okay, so Rafa today is working for Facebook. He's a senior, and your proper title is a
strategic sourcing manager.
Okay, and that's a mouthful. We'll get into that, what that means in a second. But for everyone on who know you, hello, and we will look at your comments if you want to add any. And for those who are not familiar or haven't met you before, Rafa, would you mind introducing yourself and just where you're at and what you're doing?
Good. Anyways, my name is Rafael Domingo. These days I'm living in Dublin, Ireland. I work for Facebook and strategic sourcing. Basically what that means is I'm a procurement professional. Been doing it for close to 40 years. Procurement, contract management. I love to work a deal. I get a charge of getting respect out of stakeholders and making them happy. And that's why I probably continue working and doing what I do. Besides that, I was, my life has been somewhat of a journey. I'm a kind of a restless soul. I've moved around a lot. I've lived in many places, worked internationally, been on all the continents, but Antarctica. I was born in Caracas, Venezuela. I went to the States when I was 5 with my mom, who's also Venezuelan, and my dad, who's from Barcelona, Spain.
So Rafa, let's take a second about that, because I think there are a lot of people out there that have immigrated to other countries or America. And I think it's a great story. I know when you were probably going through it, there was probably some up and downs and stuff, but definitely tell us. So you were born in Venezuela, and then you moved here, or you moved to Milwaukee, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
We moved to Milwaukee, and we lived in Milwaukee for 4 years, and then we moved to Chicago. My dad ended up getting his master's in electronic engineering at Northwestern.
Okay.
And then from there, we ended up in Los Angeles, actually in Hawthorne, California, where he ended up getting his PhD at UCLA. But my experience in coming to America was, I still have very clear memories of being a little, Venezuelan, didn't speak a word of English, kid that just ran around in shorts his whole life.
What year was this? Was this like
1959? And
okay. So yeah, you're definitely, and you were probably, I'm guessing in Milwaukee, you were one of the few of color back then.
Yeah. Well, if anything, I was like, I experienced cold and snow all at the same time for the first time. And then 2 weeks later, I was put in a kindergarten, of which I didn't speak one word of English. Everybody spoke, no one spoke Spanish. And that was my journey. I was, I was embraced. I was given a buddy that would take care of me. It was an eye-opening, to say the least, an eye-opening experience.
So how long did it take you to learn the language, or at least enough to translate or get by? Was reading easier? Was speaking? Did you get off of TV, radio, or?
No, a combination of everything. I think that, my education background, my bachelor's degree was English and linguistics. And the brain, when a child's brain is still forming and much more malleable. And And so it's kind of like a sponge. And, you know, you just, you know, in many ways, it's kind of like thinking you're a baby and you're, you know, you don't speak any language. And then you pick it all up and then it just, you know, you just keep chattering away. And
Like a sponge, and you just
yeah,
don't know better. You hear
yeah,
something,
exactly. You
put it in
know,
your vernacular, and now it's yours.
I mean, it got to the point where my mother, who, for example, always had English lessons, even though in Venezuela, and she went to like her version of high school in Barbados to learn English and everything else. But, you know, by the time I was 7 years old, you know, she would take me shopping and I would like, you know, do the translating because, you know, in 2 years, you know, I picked it up. And,
Okay. So there's so many things I want to talk to you about, because for the people who know you and the people who've been around you, you are just fascinating because you have different depths to you, your educational background, your knowledge of sports, great depths of music, politics, and all that. We're not going to get into the politics piece, but I definitely want to get into some of the sports, some of the music, some of the travel. And actually, as we talk about travel, you and for those who haven't mentioned, Ralph is actually my brother-in-law who married my older sister, but my second sister, Kath. And you guys actually just got done with the vacation before the pandemic hit, didn't you? So
yeah,
did
I
you know
mean,
about it before you went there, or did you just kind of jet on a plane and
well, you know, it was February, and you know, and like everybody else, we just, you know, we knew there was something going on, and maybe we're all in denial or whatever you want to call it. And we had planned this vacation for, you know, 3 months in advance and had all the reservations. And you know, on the 26th of February, you know, it was business as usual, and we had one, you know, I mean, and we met up with friends, and we all kind of shake our heads, and you just are amazed at that we managed to do that. In other words, we came back from Puerto Rico on the 12th, and we flew from, you know, San Juan to JFK. We're at JFK for 6 hours. Then flew in here, and then, you know, by the 17th of March, everything was shut down.
okay.
You know, and it was just, you know, yeah. I mean, we kept on tracking the news, but you know, it was still, you know, it was worrisome. Nothing was going on in Puerto Rico, and then
Luck and
you know,
timing.
yeah. I mean, we really cut it short. I mean, we came real close.
Hey, at least you got there, and everything I saw. I have not been to Puerto Rico, but I've heard great things. And you would also be a thumbs up for visiting Puerto
Yeah,
Rico.
yeah. Good people, friendly people, good food, and it's a manageable island to go do a bunch. You know, we went to a rainforest, and we hang in San Juan. Then we went to, you know, a surf town, and you know, it was perfect.
Okay.
You know, let's put it this way. You know, living in Ireland, a North Atlantic island, Celtic island. Uh, it was the first time I wore flip-flops, t-shirt, and shorts since I had left California and moved to Ireland, you know, 8 months earlier. So 9 months earlier. So it felt good to just be that California boy all over again. Or
So
yeah, even, you know.
I know, Ralph, you are a love of literature, and you are like a Jack Kerouac soul, and you like to travel around. Can you tell everyone, maybe just count on your hands, not the houses, like if you lived in 2 or 3 houses in a different city, but how many cities and countries have you lived in? Started Venezuela, then you went to Milwaukee, and
Yeah,
then obviously
Chicago.
it's not until you get older where you
Yeah.
start doing the
All
big
right.
trip.
So I would say that, you know, Venezuela, you know, Milwaukee, Chicago, Hawthorne, multiple beach cities, South Bay, LA towns like Redondo Beach,
Okay.
you know, Hermosa Beach, that area. And then, you know, I had a wonderful time living in Hawaii for 4 months. I lived in Colorado for 8 months.
Is
I
this
went to
what time of
Spain.
year? Are these in your 20s or?
No, this is right, right after high school. I decided to take a break, and I, intermittently went to college and went traveling. And
They
I
call that a
always,
skip year. The kids call it a skip year.
yeah, it turned into more than a skip year. I've always been somewhat of
Half
a
decade.
restless soul, and anyways, and so I went to Hawaii, Colorado, and then came home and went to college for a year, and then I went to Spain for 6 weeks, Barcelona for 6 weeks, and I stayed for 3 years. And even though I didn't have a degree, I taught English, and I, I've always been pretty independent, and even though I probably gave my parents a lot of emotional grief, but I was pretty much self-sufficient. I always took care of myself from financial
So
perspective.
when I
And
met you
mhm.
in Seattle, I'm guessing mid to late 90s, probably
Yeah,
96, 97, somewhere in there. So why don't you just kind of recap all the places you went from after Seattle? Because that's where
yeah,
the
sure.
big trips
Yeah.
start taking, and maybe just to talk about what you or my sister were doing, depending on what you
Sure.
moved.
So I was living in LA, and Kathy was living in Seattle, and we, through work, we got to know each other professionally, and then we just kind of befriended ourselves long distance, and one thing led to another, and then finally, I kind of made the decision that I was going to moved to Seattle, and got a job there working for a water treatment plant, and continued courting Kathy until I could convince her that I was possibly the best thing since sliced bread,
Yeah.
and have her marry me. All right, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean, she probably grounded me more than anybody else has ever been able to do, and then what happened was, because of the fact that I had worked internationally prior to them, because I worked in Saudi for 4 years, and I've loved to travel. And she also had a bit of experience because she was an exchange student in Mexico. I mean, that was one of the cool things, is that here's this Bayville girl from New York that that could speak pretty good Spanish, and so there's a lot of good things that
You
just
know,
we
she's
connected.
listening right now saying, what are you
Yeah,
saying?
right.
Pretty good
Yeah,
Spanish.
I'm getting big points here, but anyway. But anyways, and she wanted to experience international work, and so the easiest thing for me to do was to go back to Saudi, because I'd worked there before, and I got a job with a telecoms company and continued working in procurement contracts. And we went there for 4 years. And of course, while we're there, we traveled. We went to India, Thailand,
Yeah.
Australia, Istanbul, Italy, Spain.
So you've gone through a couple passport books.
Yeah, yeah. And then after 4 years of that, then I got a job in Dubai, and we moved to Dubai, and we were there for 4 years, and then we moved back. And funny, because I always end up in California, and
So when you say move back, home is San Jose right now.
yeah, we moved back, got a job in San Jose, working for a company that had business interests in Japan and in Korea. So I spent a lot of time there, and we ended up buying a house there, and we consider that home now. And then around 1990, we moved to Dublin because of Kathy's work, and I managed to get a job with the telecoms company here, and lived here close to 3 years. And then we moved back to San Jose, and then I by that time I was I was kind of figuring out what I was going to do. It was like, I've been working for over 30 years, and wasn't too sure what I wanted to do, and didn't have an appetite for much of anything. I was even thinking about retiring, and then I ended up getting a job as a temp worker at Facebook, and I did that for about 3 years, and then they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And now I'm kind of like a 20th century kind of guy as a accidental millennial. You know,
Yeah.
I'm, yeah, you know, and
You
kind of
happen to be
happy
one of
about
the
it.
older people at Facebook, but
Right. Yeah.
anyone in their 30s
Yeah.
would be the older
Yeah.
person at Facebook.
Let's put it this way. I usually go into work when I was in Menlo Park, I would go into work at 6:30, and the only people that were there at 6:30 was more or less my age bracket, and there weren't too many. Right. Right. Right.
So
But
one of the things
yeah,
I want
sure.
to talk about with definitely since we're talking about work, and if for some reason you hear a little kind of a moan, it's Chuck is next to me. My English bulldog is snoring, so I
That's
excuse
okay.
that. Or if you hear a big thud in Seattle, it's we're starting to have some thunderstorms. So just know that it is not me, it is my dog or the thunder. But one of the things I want to talk about, which I think is really interesting, because you and I both have a fascination with history, and I think you've worked for two of the, I want to say biggest, but probably two individuals that really shaped the world at their time. And so, if you can, just in a couple minutes, tell us the individuals with Howard Hughes and then also Mark Zuckerberg. Tell us what have learned about them, what it was like working at their company, and things of that nature. Because I think everyone listening obviously knows Mark Zuckerberg. We're on his platform, but a lot of people have probably heard of Howard Hughes, might have seen the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, but there's a lot more to him than that.
I would say that, man, that's that's a real kind of it's kind of like night and day. But I would say that both personalities, and they were entirely different personalities altogether, were entrepreneurs of their eras, or were and are entrepreneurs of their era. And
Do you know when Howard, and I don't know this, do you know when Howard really started? He got into movies first or the
no,
aeronautical stuff first?
I mean, I know. I think his whole background. I think it goes back to he was always in 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 manufacturing of some form of aircraft or structure, and I think his claim to fame was he developed or designed some kind of I don't know, gunner, rotating gun, something that had to deal with the gunnery of airplanes,
Yeah.
or tanks. I forget,
It
but
was
it
an
was,
airplane to rotate, and then I
yeah,
forget the name
yeah,
of the
yeah,
movie, but he used the planes and that device for
yeah,
his camera lenses and gave it.
yeah, exactly. So, but his whole thing initially was aerospace in one form or another, and in the boom years of war, post World War II, development, and the Cold War and all this other stuff. I mean, and 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 he was quite shrewd and had a vision, and man, he also got into commercial airlines, TWA. I mean, he did a lot of things that I think kind of fit the era, because that was the era. And in certain ways, it's kind of like when you look at the 21st century, I think Zuckerberg is a titan of the 21st century, internet virtual world, and in an entirely different perspective that.
And I
Um,
doubt either of them went to college. And college
yeah,
is a good place to go. I know you're very much into higher education. I think there's a lot to be said for that. But there have been a lot of people who are successful that didn't go to college if you have a true passion, desire, and discipline
yeah,
to make something of that.
yeah. It's always good to go to college, but some people are really good at uh, uh, getting their act together and have a business acumen and a vision that works. And
Yeah.
that's probably the best way to describe it, I'd say.
Okay. So one of the things I want to get into is your love of music. I think, do you have any idea how much vinyl you have?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a tough.
Oh, you
That's a
lost some, didn't you, during one
Yeah,
point?
that's a sticky subject with my darling wife. I at one time I had about, I'd say, this is before we left to go to Saudi, back in the 90s. I think I had about 500 um, albums, and it was around there. And then I left to go first, and she was. So she was kind of in charge of packing things up and having everything go into storage. And somewhere along the line, when we moved there, I kind of told her that beforehand, having experienced that kind of move beforehand. I said, Kathy, I mean, you got to get rid of most of your stuff. It's got
Do
to
we
be.
want to go down this road? Because we do. We might be losing points
Yeah,
here.
no, it's okay. It's all right. No,
Okay.
it's an honest mistake. I mean, you asked a question, got to answer it, and so she went back because she just packed everything up. And I said, we don't need all this stuff, and we're getting paid for storage. I said, you got to go back and clear some of that stuff out, and she did. Okay. The only problem was that there was a couple of pieces of furniture that had probably about 2/3 of my CDs packed away inside the furniture. And she got rid of those furniture. And she didn't realize that my vinyl.
Yeah. So you
So
probably have gone through every stage. You've gone reel to reel. You've gone 33s.
yeah,
You've gone
yeah,
vinyl. You went 8-track, then
right.
vinyl,
Yeah.
then CD,
So,
and then stream.
yeah, I mean, I'll tell you the reality of it all is that, I was probably, I'd say in the 6th grade, and I had a transistor radio, and I had a little mini reel to reel, and there would be like a song like by the Rolling Stones of, Painted Black or whatever, and I would hit the mic, I would hit the reel to reel and just put it up next to my this is really high tech, my transistor radio to tape the song.
Okay.
Right. Right, but no, yeah, I've gone through all the versions, let's put it that way.
Okay. So we always have this debate, and I love talking to you. I usually talk to you, well, I talk to you all the time, but especially around the Hall of Fame ceremonies when certain people get in. And used to joke because my sisters and I we were into Dave Matthews when he first came out. And I don't know if he's in. And I think we also listened to Hall & Oates because that was big when she was in high school. And they would babysit me, and that was the music. Billy Joel, Elton
Sure.
John, ELO, all those groups and stuff. But you and I have a debate on our favorite bands. Now, there's so many different eras, but I would say I'm more Beatles. I'm thinking you're more Stones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, totally.
And if we had to say individual person, would you say Petty or Springsteen?
Man, that's a tough call.
Or
I would say
Bowie? Throw
that.
Bowie in there.
Yeah, all three of them. I'm
Yeah.
huge. I wouldn't want to make that choice because I
Okay.
like the three of them.
So who is who really cared or caught your imagination when you were a kid? Was it the Ramones? Who was it that really okay, I got this?
Yeah. What you got to realize is that, I didn't experience, I didn't experience the 60s because I was too young, but I was very much influenced by the 60s. And so, the first album I ever bought was Sound of Silence of Simon and Garfunkel.
Okay.
By the time I was in high school.
Is that the
man,
60s or is that early 70s?
No, I'm sorry, not, sorry. Yeah, no, that was in the 60s.
Was
that
it?
was,
Like 68?
yeah, I'm a rock. Wait a minute, hold on a second. Yeah. Let me think here. Yeah, Sound of Silence was the 60s. And then what happened was, back then it was all, kind of like the 60s revolution of counterculture and everything else. And back then I was very much into Neil Young, Stones, The Who. I'm a big Neil Young fan.
So you're more cutting edge compared to the contemporaries who were a little more laid back, like the Beach Boys.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to Beach Boys, but I was very much into the, Poco, Quicksilver, that kind of crowd. And then as I got older, then I got into the whole glitter thing. Big Roxy Music fan, Bowie fan, Mata Hoople, Iggy, Iggy Pop, that whole
So
scene.
who was your first concert? Your Sounds of Silence was your first album, and that was vinyl. I'm almost
Yeah,
sure.
so my my first concert was in the Newport Pop Festival. My best friend's sister, we were 13, and she had a Volkswagen bus, and she took us there, and we went to see Grateful Dead, Mountain, Sonny and Cher, Tiny Tim. That was a long time ago.
And who was your last concert?
My last concert was the Foals. Well, actually, I take that back. The last concert there was a Bowie festival here in Dublin that they have every January. And there's a band called Holy Holy that Tony Visconti, who plays guitar and produced all of Bowie's original albums, fronts. And they did the entire edition cover of the entire albums, The Man Who Sold the World, and then some of Bowie's greatest hits and stuff. And it was a small club. It was wonderful. It was great. And it was like, I didn't realize how old I was because there's just a bunch of old people all around me.
No, I think I remember when Bowie died, I remember reaching out to you because I got tickets to not Macaw. It was what was that center? I think it's Gates. It's a more of an opera theater, but they were playing there, and it was the same people. It was people from his band, his old producer, and then they had two different singers. One who can get a little higher, one that was deeper. So it was more Ziggy compared to the modern Love era.
But yeah, I do want to say that I am very much, even though I do believe that music is outpacing me, but I still get into, let's say 21st century bands. Kathy and I we saw Lana Del Rey here, and we've seen the Foals. This is kind of funny. We're big fans of a band called The National. And we bought tickets back in October to see, we're going to spend a weekend in Belfast next weekend and see The National at the Botanic Gardens. And yesterday I got an email from Ticketmaster informing me that, the concert, been postponed or rescheduled, and my ticket is still valid.
Okay.
And the new concert date is June 12th, 2021.
Nobody, it's crazy how things are.
Okay.
It's good that they pushed it back because I've heard a lot of people are trying to be aggressive and push things to July or August, and nobody knows. I mean, the Olympics.
No, nobody knows. I just find it kind of, I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing in June of 2021. Right?
No, it's interesting. So, talking about things that are moved back, the Olympics are moved back at least a year. We know,
right.
And we are both big sports fans of baseball, basketball, and football. Football obviously has a little more time. I think they missed their first week of voluntary workouts, but they still are probably not as impacted as far as the NBA and Major League Baseball. So I'm not sure if you've heard the last thing about the NBA. They're looking to have everyone maybe come down to Orlando and have 22 teams play, and it could be like a World Cup kind of play-in, or they're not deciding how that's going to work.
Yeah. I mean, here in Europe, they're starting up the soccer leagues, and they're all, empty stadiums and stuff like that. I have a good friend who's a big baseball fan in Ventura, and he watches Korean baseball on TV. And so, I'm in, as long as there's protocol to deal with all the circumstances, and if they want to play in empty stadiums, I think the idea of possibly, this tournament could be good. I mean, there could be a lot of pull muscles, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
A lot of people just trying because they haven't been
yeah,
working out as
yeah,
much. I think that's a big thing. I think
yeah,
basketball are going to have some
yeah.
not ramp up games, but play like a preseason or something. I know baseball was thinking probably 3 weeks at least
Yeah,
to begin with, but baseball is
yeah,
having a big problem because half the players don't want to come back,
yeah.
because of the split, and it's a financial thing, but it's also a safety thing, So
Baseball can easily have a half a season. I mean, my God, I mean, you play 164 games, and you can have an
162.
82 game season and still be able to enjoy that part. I mean, I think if they try to get ambitious and think that they're going to try to fit in something, more than that, and then you got to play by ear. And the same thing with football. It's like, you know, any, you just have to deal with the circumstances and be vigilant and then understand what the implications are if something happens.
So one of the things that I've always, and the reason I started this program was just to talk about the new now, what's coming out, and talk about the silver linings. And I think reading about basketball, one of the silver linings for basketball is they usually start in October and they're going against football. And so
Yeah,
what they've always wanted to do, and reading, different documentations, is they thought if we could start around Christmas, we'd go more into June, July, August. We'd not have to compete against football, and we could have more of the prime time to ourselves. So I think if they have a season, they can probably have a short off season and try that and say, hey, let's start around Christmas time and then go later on, so we don't compete against football and some other people, but we can be the big ticket in town.
yeah, yeah. There's, Tom. There's, I'm in favor of. I love sports, so it's kind of like, it just got to make sense, and they shouldn't force it. And there's and it's interesting. You're right, though, in the sense that, we, uh, these times have made people realize that there are other alternatives, way of doing things. So, like, do you really need to go into work in the office to work, or I mean, there will be paradigm shifts that it will hopefully make it a better world, and once we get over this.
So, and Ralph, you are a little older than myself, but you're not ancient. But it was one of those things that I remember asking my nana at that time. She was older. What was the biggest thing that happened during her lifetime that was probably the biggest transformation? And I think I've mentioned this before. For her, it was airplanes, because we used to live in New York. We moved out to Washington, so she could say, I could see my daughter in 5-6 hours. And then I asked my mom, who was an RN, and for her, it was computers, because you could instead of writing everything down, you can log everything into a computer. Is there one thing that you would say is probably the most impactful during your lifetime?
I got to say that it's prior to the 21st century, I may have had something else to say, but it's got to be the internet.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a perfect example: Facebook. Look, and I'm not, I don't consider myself, a homer or anything like that, but having been a person that have moved around a lot in my life, and I have friends all over the States and in other parts of the world. Having grown up and having a Christmas call to my grandmother in Barcelona, and it's kind of like, "Hola, grandmama, Feliz Navidad." Click.
Because it was probably like $15 a minute back then.
Right. I mean, it was, and so the idea of connectivity is, staying connected with friends, family is so powerful. I mean, I have my Zoom sessions with Kathy's, your family, and my family. My best friend that I've had since I was 12 years old. I've probably, he lives in Southern California. I've probably communicated with him in the last, I say, 10, 15 years, much more than I did in 20, 30 years when I was traveling all over the world. So, I mean, that's really powerful. I'd say that.
Technology is very exciting because there's so many benefits to it. And I think I mentioned this one other time. I don't know if you listen or ever know Joe Rogan. I listened to a lot of different podcasts, and Elon Musk was on there the second time, so a couple weeks ago. And Elon Musk was talking about a Neuralink, which was a little device that they would bore into your head, and it would have the ability to go into your gray matter that might be dead and have little wires that would help fire into the synapse. And so people had ALS or dementia, that would kind of awaken certain parts of the body. And he was talking, this will be out, and they'll start testing on people that are in need of it, maybe 8 months to a year. And Joe was blown away at this. And he's just like, are we ever going to be at a point where we can just sit with each other and not have to talk, but we can communicate to each other? And Elon Musk is like, probably 5 iterations away, probably 5 to 8 years away, which is just blows me away. But it, it just does Bluetooth and just, you never know.
It is, it's kind of, I mean, there's a lot of positives to the how technology can facilitate one's existence here today. But there's nothing wrong. There's still going to be like just blubbering, mumbling exchange of discussions or people just being normal without in those moments. I mean, all that stuff is amazing, and we always and the world adjusts that way, but we still gotta, I think it's important that we don't lose our sense of sensitivity, of our own day-to-day experience.
I think during
I gotta say one. Yes, go ahead, Tim. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say during this time, the one thing I think have sped up is AI, because, it can help the supply chain. It can help a lot of different things. Tesla is talking about self-driving cars, semis, obviously planting for crops and stuff like that. And then the other thing is, depending on how people are going to be the new now, where how people are going to work and everything else, VR, virtual reality, it might take a big step forward. So
AI, like anything else, can be used detrimentally, but I think there's a lot of good stuff that come out of it. With all that though, I got to say that probably the biggest breakthrough that we could use right now is a medical and scientific solution to deal with the situation that we have.
Oh yeah. And I don't know how that's going to go, because I've heard from everyone has a different theory, but a lot of people are saying maybe first quarter they'd have a vaccine, but there are a lot of people who don't want to vaccine themselves or their children. So it's just going to be very interesting of how we're going to deal with, cutting this down. And is it going to be around kind of like the common cold? So we'll have to deal with this every year, or is there something that we could do just to kind of snuff it out?
I mean, you gotta hope that there, I don't know. I'm not going to get real philosophical here, but I will say one thing is that the greatest asset that humanity has is its brain, right? And the reason why we have the comforts and facilities and the way we live in today, even though there are a lot of people suffering that aren't having that, but is because of the brain. And history will, I'd like to believe that history will repeat itself and find ways to deal with this and sort it out.
What was the biggest thing that's happened during your life, kind of that affected the culture, affected the country or the world? Would it be Vietnam for you? Would it be?
I'll tell you something. Oh God, that's a. I mean, when it comes down to confrontation and bellicose and everything else, and I think this is also kind of an example of how we should deal with each other. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of politics here, but Probably the biggest battle that I had growing up was Cold War. And when it came down to the Cold War, even though we were all threatening each other with, nuclear bombs and everything else, um, there was no real lives, outside of a couple of proxy wars that probably nobody really had any business with, like in Vietnam and other places. But we really didn't shed any blood, or there were no nuclear bombs or anything else. And the reason for that, I think, was a lot of it was just dialogue, number one. And number two is it was a global alliance of one group or another. And I think the Western world won because lifestyle of a modified form of capitalism, there was a lot of things that just worked that the Eastern world, the Eastern Bloc countries, they saw their cousins across the walls having a better quality of life. And so I would have to say that the way we won the Cold War in terms of,
We talking
just,
the early '80s when Reagan signed off with Gorbachev, or are you talking
yeah,
about like the Bay of Pigs with Cuba and all that?
no, I'm talking about the Gorbachev detente,
Yeah.
that whole era of, making, making them realize that the world we live in was a better way to go. I know, the Eastern, certain parts of the Eastern Bloc still are having their issues, but,
Okay.
but, these days too, everybody's having issues. So, I mean,
Yeah.
but we're not,
So
I don't know. That's it. Kind of like,
so let's take what we call an awkward transition. We'll move to something else. I don't know if
okay.
people are realizing have seen you or me lately, but we have COVID hair, and myself, which is funny, is my hair doesn't get super long, but it
Yeah.
gets really thick. I have my mom's hair, so like I was joking, I probably have 2 pounds of hair just on my head, but it's not long. And I know
Right.
yourself, you used to clip your hair, but no one's open yet. So where's
No.
Dublin sitting as far as in Washington? We're at phase one. Certain counties are in phase two, meaning some people could go to restaurants, certain things are open. How is Dublin handling it, and what like phase would you be?
Uh, you know, I, you know, I think to go, outside of the fact that everybody was kind of, to one extent or another, kind of caught flat-footed because just didn't expect it.
Yeah.
I think the Irish, they've done a real good job of taking it on and being diligent and, closing everything down. And man, this is a country that's, it's a pub country. It's in many ways, it's kind of like heartbreaking, like, especially that day to day where it's 70 degrees
So all the
and blue
pubs are
sky.
closed right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we are in phase one, and phase one means that we can, you can have certain limited sidewalk, coffees, and you can pick them up. Deliveroos, you got Deliveroo bicyclists delivering food all over the place. Restaurants, I mean, you're in the restaurant, but
Yeah.
restaurants have all started some kind of delivery business and stuff like that. Next phase, and now the hardware stores are open. There's social distancing. They're recommending you wear masks in supermarkets. See, people over 70 years old are back allowed. They have certain hours and they can go to the park. And so, I mean, we're, what you got to realize too is that, Ireland is a population of 4.5 million. It's an island. And so they're kind of already cocooned, or as they say here, isolated. And then Dublin, Greater Dublin's, I don't know, 1.5 million.
Yeah. And people don't
And
realize this sometimes, that people have traveled to Dublin or to Ireland to visit, but a lot of us don't realize until we really look at it. Dublin's only really the size of maybe South Carolina. It's a very small area. I
yeah,
remember going there, and I've visited probably 4 or 5 times when you and Kath have been there, but I've also visited where we've gone up north all the way down to south to
mhm.
Cork and around within like 2 days. It's not that big
Yeah.
of
I mean, you can get across to Galway in 2 hours plus. And I think from north to south, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. So yeah, it's so, but anyways, they're improving the numbers of drop are, they don't compare to anything that's going on in the States. But
Do they
they're,
have any plans coming up for phase two? Do you know when that's going to start?
yeah, so phase two is going to start, I believe, on the 8th, and you'll be allowed to go 20 kilometers. And then certain other stores, like small businesses, there's going to be certain stores are going to be allowed to open and things like that. For Kathy and I, we managed to get our 10,000 steps every day. Kathy, if she could, she'd probably walk from one end of the island to the other. But she, and the cool thing about living in city center, more or less, is that, we've got our trajectories, and, our walks can consist of walking along canals, the river Leafy, the Sandy Mount, Irish Sea coastline, or just hit 3 or 4 different parks, because there's parks everywhere. And yeah, and gotten to know a lot of different, I've never been into like, picking out, oh, what kind of bird that is or that, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of fauna. I mean, a lot of birds everywhere. It's pretty cool. I mean,
So one of the things that, has Facebook or CathWorks Accenture, have you guys talked about, like your companies talked about, like when you'll be back on your campus or your buildings, or is it still up to date?
no, yeah, there's always been tentative plans of, and then it just kind of, it's kind of I don't know if you want to call it, it's a learning experience. And I think probably maybe the best way to do it is that I think on both, I'd like, in our cases, I think the companies are happy with the performance of, those that work for them, because, I mean, everybody's just doing their jobs. And, again, it's the whole internet world where it's one of those kind of like paradigm shifts. And there's talk of certain places, for essential places, are already opening. There could be some kind of mobilization later in June, another one in July, that kind of thing. But it's cautiously being managed and trying to figure out. But for me, I'd say that, the biggest challenge is, whether it's any company, is, I got to be careful what I say here, but it's kind of like, I don't have a long-term career at Facebook. Right? So, and so I just, but
We say we're on the back nine of our career.
yeah, exactly. And so it's really the younger workforce that really need, could really, learn and take advantage, or need that work environment so they can learn. And it's just
I would be excited if I was younger, because if you work remotely, you can work anywhere in the world, and you can travel, take vacations. I mean, there's so many possibilities that are out there. It's an exciting time where I think you and I were in corporate America. We were definitely a 9 to 5 or whatever the hours were within a cubicle or in a building. And this is exciting, I think.
I tell you, and you're right about that. But there's, I think there's always going to be kind of a learning and a social experience within the younger age groups, where they like to just be around people a little bit more than we would, right? At a certain point. But it's, we'll see. I mean, we'll see how things go.
So I noticed we've been talking for almost 50 minutes, so I don't want to take too much time, but there are 2 other things I really want to talk about. I think you're an exceptional cook, and one thing I've really never knew, and I don't think I've learned, is where you got your passion for cooking, and how'd you learn it? Is it something you picked up from your mom? Is it something that just came to you later in life?
So, that Tom, that's kind of like full circle there too, because it also plays a lot into what I'm doing today in Facebook. But anyway, I was very fortunate to have, my mother was a good cook, my grandmother was a good cook. And then, going through all the cycles that you do when you're growing up. And since I more or less left home after high school, I just got tired of eating out. And so I kind of just through time, made it, I like to eat out, but I'm not going to eat out every day. Kathy and I would love to always have a good meal somewhere, but I would rather just try to reinvent whatever my mother or grandmother cooked and and at first it came out pretty bad, I'd say, but through time, I just pick up on things
There's a lot of Venezuelan.
Yeah, everything. Everything. Venezuelan, Spanish, American. The other day I made some udon noodles, and it's all kind of good stuff. And that kind of, so, I give them the credit, and it's nothing like a good cooked meal. I like to eat, I like to entertain. I like the pleasures of a good bottle of wine and everything else. And then that kind of leads into, why in many ways it's a perfect ending to a career. Is that one of the things that I specialize at Facebook as a strategic sourcing is the whole culinary category, and it's a bunch of fun working with a bunch of chefs.
Yeah.
And then that's it.
I don't think we've talked about what you do at Facebook, so maybe just give a 2-3 minute synopsis of what you do at Facebook, because most of us think Facebook, you're in technology, IT, or something technical. And you have definitely a unique spin of what you do at Facebook, because a lot of people, especially who haven't been to Menlo Park or to certain campuses, wouldn't realize, how important your job is, because people don't understand just the size of Facebook sometimes.
Yeah, there's always a kind of like the romantic side, the technology side, but there's a whole crew of us that are all our own category experts, and we basically support the infrastructure that makes Facebook exist on a day-to-day basis. And infrastructure, is like, professional services, transportation, facilities, janitorial services, all kinds of things. And then, and for me is, I support mostly the facility side and the culinary side. And there's a lot of buildings, and there's a lot of kitchens.
And I don't know if you can talk about your budget, because you don't want to talk about your budget, but you talk about the pounds of just the size of some of your orders. I don't know if you can get into it or not, but just so people understand just how large.
Yeah.
How many restaurants like Menlo Park has by itself, just that campus?
Yeah, Tom, I'd love to, but
okay.
Let's put it this way, globally, there are, I'd say, probably over 40 offices, and we've got over 50,000 people, and we
gotta feed them all.
We take care of them. We do our best to take care of them.
Okay, the other thing is I want to tell a funny story. So back in the 90s, late 90s, you and I played on the same softball team together for a number of years before you moved out. And I noticed within the last probably 10 years, how many tattoos you have now? 4?
I think I've got 9 now.
9 tattoos, okay. And Kathy gave you up to what, 10? Was that the ceiling?
No, yeah, man. I had to sign a tattoo agreement that I'd never do it again, and I have to meet certain conditions. So I'm done. All right.
Is Kathy kind of like a Peloton wife? She's putting restrictions on you.
Kathy keeps me grounded, but she also spoils me. How's that?
So did you ever, now for people who don't know the story, you have a larger scar on one of your hip bones probably, or somewhere else. Did you ever get that taken care of?
Yeah. It's like we were playing softball, and I was probably the slowest guy on the team, and I tried to score from second, and then I decided to slide, and I didn't even hit the plate, and I got called out. And I ended up having a big old raspberry on my hip that ached for days.
It was I didn't see it, but I heard it was a healthy size softball. size.
Yeah, it was, you know, roadkill.
I heard about that one, and my sister yelled at me for that. Why'd you make him
Yeah,
slide? I was like, we needed the we needed the run.
yeah.
You
Oh,
understand?
man, I just thought I was about 10 years younger, maybe 20.
So we're about to end, and for some reason Chuck just got up, so maybe we
Hey,
could
Chuck.
to go. But is there anything silver lining that you could think of that you're getting out of this time to spend more time at home, to exercise, to walk, to cook? Is there any silver linings that you're experiencing during this time, or maybe you can pass along to other people of maybe leveraging this time to, a lot of us get worried because of what we read and hear, but maybe to look at things optimistically?
Yeah. You know, I tell you something that's, oh man, it is, you know, it can be challenging times, and you gotta, I mean, I'm a believer that it's going to get sorted out, and you know, and there's nothing about being respectful, cautious, decent. You know, it was interesting. You know, when they let the people over 70 years old go out, and everybody's got to be, you know, and they all wearing masks and everything else, and it gives me a lot of just satisfaction to when I see them come in, and I clear out, and they smile and just say thank you. So, you know,
I think I'm noticing more because I live in a high rise that more people are friendlier. People are looking each other in the eye, saying hi,
yeah,
welcome, thank you, more than they did before. People are glued more on their phone, and I think people are more conscious of other people in their space now.
yeah. I totally agree with that. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
good. So anything that you're looking at, or you and Kath watch anything on Netflix? Anything? Reading any good books? What are you up to? Still playing? What do you guys play with my mom? Words with
Dominoes.
Friends or something?
We
Words
played
with your
dominoes.
friends.
We continued to play dominoes, but no, Kathy, the movies I see, she's always like ooh and ah, and it's like, oh, what do you want to watch this for? And so for every movie I see, she sees about 10 of them, and she's totally into Normal People right now. Man, I saw a great Joe Cocker documentary, by the way, wonderful. And one of the key commentators through the whole thing was Billy Joel. And
Oh, wow.
anyways, highly recommend it. But you know, she controls the TV. Once in a blue moon, we'll agree to watch something. Usually, what I watch is not necessarily what she likes, but she allows me to watch.
Well, it's longer, but did you watch The Irishman with De Niro?
Yeah, we did. Actually, we saw it at cinema.
It was a good movie. It was a little longer, but if you like history and kind
Yeah,
of like
no, you know, it was pretty interesting. I mean, in terms of movies, let me think here. You know, you know, God, what was the last movie that we watched that, Buster Scruggs. She hated it.
never even
Ballad of
heard of
Buster
it.
Scruggs and Coen Brothers. No, that didn't go well.
Well, I think we're about an hour, and I want to thank you so much for your time because I always love catching up with you and talk to you about different things about music, sports, everything else. But it was great to talk to somebody because I want to get a diversity of people, what people look like, their ages, and where they are in the world, just to get their perspective and share with everyone out there. So for everyone who's listening, um, just take care of yourself, be smart, and just show some patience. And for Rafa, I want to thank you so much for this time. And hopefully, Kath will be done with her walk, and you guys can have some great dinner.
Here you go, Tom. An elbow hug. There you
All
go.
right. Be
Take
well,
care.
my friend. We'll
Take
talk
care.
soon.
Bye.
Thanks.